Today we're going to begin talking about some more complicated data structures that can store multiple pieces of data. And the first one that we'll discuss is called a list. A list is just that, it stores a list of data. And so in the list you can store multiple data points. You can store as many data points as you like. And now we're going to start creating our first list. So the way you can create a list in Python is you just say you have your variable name. So you can say my first list, the assignment operator, the equal sign, and then you have square brackets. And the contents of your list go inside of this brackets. So let's say you want your list to contain some numbers, so we'll just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when you have multiple items in a list, they're separated by a comma, and the entire list is contained in brackets. So let's run this cell, and it ran fine. Then let's just print my first list. And it prints the list with the brackets and the comma separating the values. Something that's really important with lists is you might want to add an item to a list. And for that you can use a method called append. So you can just say my first list dot append, and you can add in whatever value you would like. So whatever value you want to add to the end of your list goes in here. So if you want to add the number 6, you can just run that. And then if you print my first list again, now it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And when you use this append function, you don't have to append one value at a time. So let's copy this. And we're going to pass the list directly into this function. So let's append 7, 8, 9. And then we're going to print my first list again. And I want you to see what happened here. When we appended this list, it actually added the list. It didn't extract the values from the list and add those into our prior list. It just added the second list directly into the first list. But we'll come back to that later. For now, I want to show you how you can access an element inside of a list. When we say element, we just mean an item. To do that, you type our first list, and then you have these square brackets. And what you'll put in these square brackets is called an index. So let's put in 0 and see what happens. It gives us 1, which is the first item in our list. Now this may seem counterintuitive. You might think the first item in your list would be at index 1. But the way Python works is the first index is always 0. And that's a recurring theme you'll see throughout the Python language. So if you want to access the first element in your list, then that would be index 0, not index 1. If you were to pass in index 1, it gives you 2, which is the second item in our list. So 0 is the first one, so that's 0. Then that would be index 1, index 2, and so on and so forth. But one thing you can also do is you can start indexing from the end of an array. So if you want to get it the last element, you can pass in index -1. You can't do -0 because 0 and -0 are the same thing. If you were to do that, it will give you the first element again. But if you do -1, it gives you the last element in the list. And let's see what happens when we do that. The last element in our list is a list itself. We have a list inside of a list. And you can see that here, when we get the last element, and we get that by using this -1 index, then it returns a list that contains 7, 8, 9. And the reason why this is the last thing is because, remember, this append function appends whatever you have inside of it to the end of your list. Reference values inside of that list. But what if you want to reference a range of values? So let's say you want to extract multiple values from your list. And you can do that in Python too. So you can just do my first list, and you'll have your square brackets again. The difference is you'll have a colon, and that colon will specify where you want to start and where you want to stop. So let's say we want to start at the beginning. So we'll do 0, and we want to get the first 2 items in our list. So we do :2. So this is saying start at index 0. So get index 0 and stop at index 2. So this will give us index 0 and 1. This 2, this is considered excluded. It's not included. So index 2 will not be included. But remember, this can index 0 and 1, so it will still return 2 items. So if we run this, we'll see 1 and 2, because those are the first 2 items in our list. But let's say you want to get the first 5 items, but you only want to get every other item. So this will return 1, 3, and 5. But you can also pass in a step. So you add another colon, and you can do a step. So remember, this is telling you what index to start, which is included, what index to stop at, which is excluded, and the step, which is how many items do you want to have that are excluded. So this is saying we want to get our first 5 items, but get every other item. Let's run this with a step of 1 and compare that to not having any step at all and see how it compares. So this gets our first 5 items, and so does that, because the default step is 1. Alright, so let's delete this cell, and let's change the step to 2 and see what happens. Now it gives us 1, 3, and 5 because it's skipping items. So since your step is 2, it's only looking at these first 5 items, and it's getting this one, and then it's skipping, then it's getting 3, and then skipping, and then getting 5. So you can use this if you want to get, say, every odd index number or every even index number, or you can do this depending on what your use case is. You can use the step to only extract certain values from your list. Another thing I want to show you is how you can get the length of a list. So for that, you type len and you have parentheses, and then in your parentheses you just put in the name of your list, and the name of our list is 7 items. So we have 7 items in this list. So, and remember, the index start at 0. So we have a 7 item list. So our indices will be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And let's look at what happens. So if we pass in 6 for the index, we get the last item in our list. Let's see what happens if we pass in 7. Remember, our indices stop at 6 because it's a 7 item list. If you run this, you get an index error, and it says index error, list index out of range. And that's because your indices are 0 through 6 inclusive. So if you try to go to index 7, that item does not exist inside of your list, so Python returns an error. As you can also use a negative step. When you use a negative step, this only works if your start is greater than your stop. So we're going to start at index 6. So we'll start at the end of our array, and we'll stop at index 0, and we'll get every other element starting from the end of our list. And when we run that, you can see it gives us the last element of our list. It skips 1, then gives us the next one, and then skips 1. Let's see what happens if we try to do this with the positive step. It returns a blank list because it's starting at the end of your list, but the step is positive, so it's going forward. So there's no values it's actually getting from your list, which is why a blank list is returned. So we'll make that negative and run that again. And you can also, remember we talked about how you can use negative indices. So let's do 0 to negative 1 with the step of 2, and this will work. And so this was just an introduction in the list. We'll talk more about other data structures like sets and dictionaries and tuples as the course progresses. Lists are very foundational to Python programming, and there's a lot of things you can do with them, which we'll see more as the course goes on and we start combining more of these things. Especially when we talk about loops, then we'll definitely double back and talk about lists some more. But I just want to give you a quick intro today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.